So thank you everyone for joining us in this panel. And in today's discussion, we will have the designers Kath Andrews, Lilo Franco, and Wooly Wormhead. You will find all the links to their shops in the chat and in the description of the YouTube video. Okay, so we will begin with a little introduction for each of the designers. Please tell us a bit about yourself, about the design business that you have, and how you got started. Should we start with Kath?
Hi. So I've been knitting since I was 5, which is 45 years. And so I've been designing since, well, publishing my designs since about 2011. I did a City and Guilds in hand knit textiles, and that's really been brilliant to expand all my knowledge of different techniques and proper ways of doing things when you're writing stuff out, which is very helpful. And I was a school teacher and I left that in 2018. And since then, I've been working full time on the designing and doing knitting workshops. So I like making new knitters. So it's a good feeling when people go, oh, I can do this. And so, yeah, I like designing all sorts of things, all sorts of different difficulties. I'm
That's so
surrounded by
awesome.
yarn all the time.
Awesome, thank you so much. Wooly, would you like to tell us about your business and how you got started?
Hi there, I'm Wooly, Wooly Wormhead. Everyone calls me Wooly. I have a thing for hats. I am known for knitting hats, but that's not my only interest. I'm also really interested in technique and construction and exploring different ways of using techniques and putting things out of context and mixing things up and sort of just experimenting generally. But yeah, hats are my thing. They are the most three-dimensional garment that there is, and so that gives me almost infinite potential to explore shape and form. Similar to Kath, I used to be a teacher. I used to teach art and textiles. I was the 3D and textile specialist in the art department, and I was used to teach in the textile department. And before that, I did practicing artist for a while because I have a fine art degree in sculpture. And before that, I was an electronics engineer and used to work in engineering for a while too. So kind of engineering brain, art, 3D brain, and teacher brain all kind of come together quite happily in what I do. And I've been doing this for 18 years, which is the longest I've ever done anything ever in my life. So it's obviously working for me somehow. I actually started writing patterns after I was medically retired in 2005. I'd had what I now know to have been a complete kind of autistic breakdown. And so I lost my job and I needed to do something to keep my brain ticking over. And I'd been knitting since I was a child. My mum taught me when I was 3, and I'm heading up to my 50th anniversary of being able to knit, which makes me feel really, really old. I knit my first jumper when I was 9. I designed my first jumper when I was 12. It's just something that I've always done. And so after I lost my job, I was kind of like, okay, let's write down much more of what I'm doing so I can remember what I'm doing, because I had no working memory at all at the time. And so it became then a process of keeping myself going, recording what I was actually doing, but it actually became something much bigger than that, and it just grew out there really. And to some extent it's still very much the same. I'm experimenting, trying to keep my brain circuits going and writing down what I'm doing as I go. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, I relate a lot to that. Thank you so much for sharing the story of the beginning and the continuing of your business. It's an awesome story. Thank you. Leila, do you want to also share your beginnings and how it's going now?
Sure. So I also learned to knit as a child. I can't remember how old I was because I didn't continue. I knit, I think, one thing, a scarf, and then I stopped. I took it up again in 2010. I was between jobs at the time in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language and barely knew anybody. So I found the craft shop and I took up actually crochet first and then knitting. And then I've sort of continued since then. I published my first pattern in 2017. And I have two small children, so I was working part-time as a climate scientist in research up until about a year ago, 18 months ago, I think. And then I quit that job because I wasn't enjoying it anymore. As I enjoyed the designing more and more, I was enjoying academia less and less. So I left academia and now I'm working part-time on my design business. I design mostly shawls and mostly with brioche. What else is there to say?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think we all have this technical thing in common where we like the technical parts of the knitting and crochet very much. So thank you for everyone for sharing the beginnings. And now we will go to the next question, which is, what is your favorite technique in your chosen craft? I will assume that here we are mostly talking about knitting right now, right? So wait a second to admit someone. Okay, thank you. And Leila, do you want to continue with the second question? What's your favorite technique?
Brioche.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly obvious. I think I have two designs that are not brioche out of all of mine. So yeah, brioche in all its forms.
Okay, thank you. Wooly, what's your favorite technique in your chosen craft?
I don't know that I have one. So I'm going to cheat and say I have two. And that's short rows and grafting. Especially when they're together. I just kind of really like playing with, I don't know, grafting is incredibly satisfying and I like exploring new ways of grafting stitches that haven't been grafted before. It's it's another way of looking at knitting, and we're mimicking it, but we are actually knitting in a completely different way. And I like what short rows can do for shape and form because they're magic. Short rows are magic. So yeah, that's my thing. They give me three-dimensional shapes from different directions because I like to explore 3D and go around, and those are the techniques I need to be able to kind of accomplish some of the shapes I want to get.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Kath, would you share your favorite technique?
Yeah, like Willie, it's hard to sort of narrow it down to one. I'm a big fan of lace knitting and I've done quite a lot of lace shawls and things like that. But I also love brioche and ferrule and other stranded color work and other color work things. But I like combining techniques too. My latest pattern is a combination of Mobius and brioche because brioche looks so cool on both sides and Mobius means you get to see both sides at the same time. So it seemed like, oh, why don't I see if I can make this work? And it did. And I just love playing with techniques and seeing what you can put together to see if it works.
That's awesome. It's a very beautiful example as well of mixing techniques. So I think this will go very well with the next question that we have for the panel is, do you prefer designs that challenge you as a designer or ones that you can just crank out with ease? Maybe you can ask this question as well. I think I know your answer.
Yeah. Well, when I'm teaching knitting, then I'll be putting together sort of simpler things, and especially when I'm working with beginners. And some of my designs have come about as a result of the workshops that I've put together. And then I've thought, okay, well, these particular swatches would work really well together. Say I've been learning slip stitch techniques, and then I've put it together to form a scarf. So sometimes patterns that are easy are great, because knitters that are starting off, they need to be able to feel that they can actually make something. But I do love a challenge. I do love something that makes my brain hurt a bit. I don't know why, but things that you really have to sort of play with and experiment with to make it work. I like that.
It feels good.
I like 3D Jenga.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Leela, what's your answer to this question? Do you prefer designs that challenge you or something more simple?
There's usually a bit of a challenge in there, I think. It actually depends on, well, my own state. I design what I feel like knitting at the time. So usually there's a bit of interest in there. Otherwise, I get bored partway through and never want to finish the thing. But there have been occasions in which I just didn't have much brain space left over for anything too complicated, and then I tend to work on simpler things. But yeah, definitely more of my patterns would lean towards the challenging side of the equation. Not on purpose. I think it's just kind of the way my brain works, I guess. It's what I enjoy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense based on what I've seen from all of your designs, that all of you have more complexity than simple. Wooly, would you answer this question as well, please?
Yeah, I definitely have to have a design that's going to bend my brain for me to actually even finish it. Otherwise, I kind of I like to challenge myself. I like to explore those things, and like Kath was saying with techniques, I like to combine techniques and try something new and put something in a different context and see how it's going to work. I do have some simpler designs, and they're often my stepping stone designs. Like if I've just finished a big book or a big project and I'm kind of a bit low on bandwidth, I will do something simpler, and that's often where some of my free patterns come from. Or I might just do it to kind of just try out something that I've might have in mind. It might be a kind of like a swatching process. So I need to have to develop my designs. I need to have something on the needles. I can't do it all on paper at all. I need to do the process, and very much a process designer. But yeah, if they don't grab my interest, and I have a very, very short attention span, I've got hats that are knit in the round bottom up that have sat there because they've got so boring partway through the body that I couldn't be bothered to finish the crown. And so if I can't make it interesting enough for me to get to the end, then it doesn't happen. So I normally needs something fairly challenging, but not necessarily complicated, just a new challenge to me. And that's why hats are just the perfect canvas for me, because I can go any which way, shape and form, and I'm still going to get something that fits on my head. So it's kind of like, that's the way I see it.
That makes sense. So thank you for answering this question, everyone. I see we have a lot of things in common. Yeah. And the next question to the panel is about accessibility, because the Fasten Off Yarnalong is an event that's focused on accessibility. I want to ask you how you decide what information about a pattern you share on your platform or in your sales platforms, and how do you make sure that this information is accessible? So these are two questions, actually. It's first, what information do you offer? and how is this accessible to your potential customers? Molly, if you want to continue with this question.
Information that I share up front will be as much as I can in terms of yardage, size to fit, the final size of the item. The way I present the information will be, I don't list a specific yarn. I will put the yarn weight that's used and then say the sample is made in so-and-so. So if I get yarn sponsorship, or there is a yarn company that I've worked with, or I've used a specific yarn, they still got a mention, but they're kind of, I try and structure the information I give so that it's anybody can just basically take the weight and the type of yarn and use what they have available to them. So it's not, I don't like the pressure that sometimes that knitters feel that they have to make the pattern in the yarn, and I understand why that happens in our industry, but I kind of feel that, especially when yarns are different in different countries and not everybody has the same availability, so that's something I feel quite strongly about. I also do not use skill levels. I think that skill levels are something that actually should go in the bin because they put people off. I get that the idea of them is to help people understand how complicated something is, but actually that puts more people off trying something. And I find that a barrier. I know that probably doesn't fit quite fully with an accessibility question, but I do find that as a barrier, because people kind of in their heads will, well, that's got short rows in it, I can't do it. Because actually you can, you know, it's everything's complicated until we learn how to do it. So it's trying to, when I present the information on a pattern, I want to try and make it so that nothing's tied down to things that might be barriers for people, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will list the skills included so people know what's coming up, so what's involved. I want to try and make sure there's no hidden surprises when they open up a pattern. And little things like the file size of the PDF, so that people aren't downloading a giant PDF on a low bandwidth, because not everybody has full speed broadband, for instance, you know, so there's other areas of accessibility that come in with that. Mm-hmm. And I've forgotten the other part of the question was. Sorry.
The other part was, how do you make sure that the information is accessible on the sales platform?
In terms of how it's using the way it's written out and using headers for things, because that is somewhat platform dependent. Ravelry doesn't allow you to put a header notation in the hashtags, for instance. So, you know, you just bold a header and that's all you've got. So it's actually not very accessible from that point of view. You can do that on PayHip. I'm having a new website built that's been in the process for a couple of years, because we had a few false starts, that I'm hoping is going to be much more accessible in terms of being navigated by the keyboard and being user friendly for screen readers. But there's other things like we've spent, and Kath will know this because she's worked with me a little bit on it. I mean, we've spent months kind of making sure that refining our alt text for all of the images, and then I have little things like the description of the hats, the final piece, so that if somebody can't see the images, they get not just the alt text to tell them what's there, but they actually get an idea, kind of like a guided view of the object in words, so that it then means that there's another way of describing what the knitting item is going to be. So we're trying to build all that at the moment. That's not on all of the platforms, but that's what we're working on.
That's a great idea. Sometimes people don't know how to use the alt text to actually describe the thing, but if you have an alt text and a description, that's extra.
Yeah, I mean, it does really, really help, especially because I mean, this is where videos have been really good, but also videos are heavy on bandwidth, and not everybody has the internet to do it, and not everybody has the resources, because if you're not using video, if you're not producing video well, it can actually end up being more inaccessible than not using video. Mm-hmm. But not everybody, when they're looking at images, can conceptualize what it looks like all the way around. And especially for a hat, especially for somebody like me that kind of thinks the back of the hat is as important as the front of the hat, having a range of photographs that shows it from different ranges doesn't necessarily mean that the person looking at the images is going to be able to form that picture in their minds themselves. So video can be really useful for that, to have a slow motion video to just kind of like give it a 3D panoramic view, but also, yeah, you have that description that shows up on text that talks about what's happening with the pattern and what shape it is. And then so that's another way of presenting the information about what your object's going to be. Yeah, I could probably talk about this for ages, and Kat's been working with us for quite a while. We've been working on this for 3 years, so we've learned a lot about accessibility, and there's so much, really. It's a huge field.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kath, would you like to continue?
Yeah, that'd be lovely. So yeah, I've done some alt text descriptions for Woolly's stuff, but ironically I haven't done it for all of my own yet. So that's something I need to keep working on, adding alt text to my own images on my website. In terms of information, I like to, where I can, include all the stuff that you'd get on the inside of the pattern, like the tension, and if it's a garment particularly, all the sizing, not just the chest size, because for somebody like me, I've got big arms, and if I'm knitting a garment, if it fits on the chest, there's absolutely no guarantee it's going to fit on the arms. So I often, if a pattern doesn't show that, have to, if it's in a magazine, I can look at the number of stitches on the sleeve and work it out from the tension, whether it's going to fit me or if I've got to adjust it. But if that information's there up front, somebody will know whether it's worth actually shelling out the money for a pattern, or if they're going to end up with something that they've either got to reinvent themselves to make it work, or they're just going to end up with something that they can't wear, which is a pain. So I like to include that. And also I agree with Woolly about the levels of difficulty. It's not something that I do, but Lovecrafts makes you. So when I upload things to there, it says, what level of difficulty is it? Well, I don't know. I always just tend to click the middle one. But it depends where you are in your knitting journey, doesn't it? So you could find that something it's not necessarily a hard technique, but it's a new to you technique. So in that respect, yeah, it's going to be trickier. What else do I include? Yarn, I always say what I've used, and I'm trying to give more options in my designs. So the one that I showed you earlier, this one, the Mobius brioche cowl, I've actually designed it for a DK weight and an Aran weight, so you could make it with just a small amount of yarn, because you can actually make that out of just 25 grams of each color, or 100 grams each of Aran weight yarn, depending on what you've got and what you fancy. So giving people options, I think, is increasingly important to me. And then telling people, what the possibilities are that they could do with it. Because if it's just, thou must do this, it's a bit limiting sometimes. Accessibility wise, gosh, I know I need to do more on the alt text on my own photos, but I do try and describe things in the actual blurb as much as I can.
That's great.
I think that's all I can think of right now.
Yeah. So you sell on Lovecraft. Do you have an?
I sell on Lovecrafts and Payhip and Ravelry and my own website, which checks out through Payhip.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So those platforms have the responsibility to be accessible to people directly. And there's not much you can do on your side except for descriptions and stuff like that. Okay, thank you. Lila, what's your take on this?
I don't feel like this is something I can be particularly proud of. I mean, apart from selling on PayHip, I set my PayHip shop up a few years ago when there was the whole Ravelry accessibility debacle. That was sort of the bare minimum I thought I could do to make sure that people who can't use Ravelry can still get my patterns. I also have them on Lovecrafts. But I don't know, I wanted to do more and I just didn't know where to start, and then I didn't start. Because, there's the making things screen reader accessible, making things, having big fonts of versions of your patterns and all these things. And I just, I think I have alt text descriptions on a few photos, but not that many. I'm trying to get into the habit of, as I put new ones up, making sure at least all the newer ones have it, but I haven't been back through my older patterns to fix any of that stuff. It's on my to-do list, and it's been on my to-do list for several years, so I can't be very proud of that. As for how much information I share about the patterns, I think it's really unfair if you have to buy a pattern before you get the information you'd need to know whether you actually would wear it or can knit it, or if it'll fit you. So definitely things like the tools and materials you need, the size of the finished object, the gauge, the shape. Because I knit mostly shawls, it's quite simpler, it's a lot simpler than garments. You can describe the shape of the thing, or you can show photos of stretched out so that people get an idea of the shape of it, and if they think it's going to be wearable for them. One thing I do like to do when I'm designing is make it a little bit flexible, because not everybody has the same gauge or using the same yarn. So different, it can be fingering weight, and it can be anywhere from 300 and something to 420 meters in one skein. So I say a skein of fingering weight, and that doesn't always mean the same thing. So I like, where I can, designing patterns that you can maybe stop further up the shawl and it's not going to completely ruin the design of the thing, or you can do an extra repeat, or if you want the shawl to be larger, I'll say repeat chart C, or whatever it is, that it's a little bit more flexible, that people can make things the size they want or with the materials they have. I can't remember if I've answered the entire question now, but I think that was it.
Yes. Can I have an extra question? Do you also offer instructions, like written instructions, or charts mainly?
Yeah, so both. I think I have one pattern that doesn't have charts, only written instructions, because the charts were like bigger than my head could fit. Everything else has both written instructions and charts.
I think that's a great accessibility feature, because some people can't use only charts to make things like shawls.
It does mean some of my patterns are like 35 pages long.
Yes, but they are more accessible.
Yeah. And one thing I do try and do is separate things so that you don't have to print the entire pattern. Mm-hmm. So I try and put like most of the photos at the beginning and the end, and then there's the written instruction, and then there's the chart. So if you only want the written instructions, you can just print those pages, because I still remember when printer ink and paper was precious. And if you just want the charts, you can print less. So I try and do that where I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing with us everything you do for accessibility. And now I will continue with the next question, which is, please tell us about a design of yours that you think crafters would love making, but which hasn't taken off yet. And I think I will continue with Lila.
I have sort of two answers to that question, because of course I have a design that I love that nobody else seemed to even notice. But before I tell you about that design, I actually try quite hard not to think too much about, oh, this pattern's going to be the next big hit, because I'm really bad at predicting what's going to be, what's going to sell well and what's going to not. And so if I try to chase the idea that I think will sell, it kind of actually destroys the fun of the designing for me, and then it doesn't end up selling well anyway, and then I'm just really disappointed because the whole thing was just disappointing. So on the one hand, I do try not to follow bandwagons too closely or anything like that, but on the other hand, of course, I love all my designs, and when they don't sell well, I am disappointed. So I brought a shawl to show you. This was actually a bandwagon that I jumped on. It's a kind of, well, you can see it's a fade. So it's 4 different colors. And if I bring it close to the screen, I don't know how well you can see that. You can see I use sort of brioche texture to swap the colors so that it sort of fades. And I love this shawl. It's my most worn shawl. I can't put it on now because it's boiling hot, but it's definitely the one I wear the most out of all the things I've ever knitted. And yet it sold very disappointingly. And I don't know why. I don't know whether I was just late to the fade bandwagon, or whether people who knit brioche don't do bandwagons, or I don't know. It's very difficult to know why things sell well and why they don't.
Maybe the bandwagon thing relates to how popular you are in the grand scheme of things.
Yes, there's that too. Definitely.
Yeah. So if you're a person with a very big audience, then many people will make
and you create
the
your
thing.
own bandwagons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope. Yeah.
I did like the whole, I love a good gradient yarn, and the fades, I did think they were beautiful.
I think they're beautiful too.
Yeah, and when they're done well, they can be really, really nice. And I was quite pleased with mine. So, my little self-satisfaction didn't quite translate into sales.
Well, maybe people will see it and they will take it up for the future. The good thing about creating these products is that they're evergreen, so we can always have a spike in sales at some point in the future. You never know. Yeah, thank you. Wooly, do you want to share something that you love and most people haven't seen yet?
It's actually not one hat, it's a collection of hats, and Amber's actually wearing one. It's 8 hats, so I will try and not be too long about this, but it's my cuboidal collection, and I love them. I had so much fun designing them, and I really wanted to explore using mitre squares in hats for a while. And my first approach to it was trying to make the squares fit a certain hat style, and I kept hitting brick wall, and it wasn't working until I kind of switched and just thought, where do the squares want to go? And then this collection just grew, and this is one that's that Amber's wearing at the moment, which is can be worn in a number of different ways. And there's, berets made out of mitre squares, there's even the beanie, the simple beanie has just kind of got this kind of like magic about the way that the squares come together. And there's all sorts of shapes, different helmets. Again, that one can be worn like a bonnet, or it can be worn up this way. So the whole collection ended up being quite a more versatile in style than I originally intended. And I think there are a couple of reasons that put people off. One, I think sometimes I've found it in the past that when I've got really into something and really gone proper nerdy on what I'm exploring, is that sometimes they end up being, I think people just kind of go, whoa, Wooly, what you doing kind of thing. I've had the response from people before telling me that some of my designs can be a bit intimidating or a bit out there, and and I think maybe these are a little bit of that. But I also think people are not aware that there's absolutely no finishing involved. I think sometimes when it comes to mitre squares, people think, oh, there's so many ends to weave in, whereas actually the entire collection, most of the tutorials are all about how you can work them all without absolutely no finishing, and you've got how to make work the squares in the round, how to work corners, all by picking up and doing it completely seamlessly in the process as you go. So I've done them all deliberately with absolute minimal finishing. So they are actually, everything's in there, and there's like 20 odd 30 pages of tutorials just covering the very basics from the mitre square right the way through. And I think also perhaps there's maybe sometimes I think that I put too much choice in and too much options. And then this is possibly one collection that has that. I think it's really, really good. We were talking, Lily was saying about, you know, being able to put more options into patterns. And I've been moving in that direction more, designing hats that can be used in different weight yarns. But I think there also becomes a point where you actually end up putting too much in, and I get kind of overexcited and I kind of, right, oh, let's do all this stuff. And then I think that then overwhelms the knitter. Sometimes I think that's, I've not had anybody tell me that, that's just what I think is happening, especially with this particular collection, because there's so much that can be done. It's for any weight yarn, any size hat, 8 different sizes, 8 different squares. The combinations of what you can achieve are almost kind of too much. But I don't know, I wish it would get more love, because I was really, really chuffed with myself. Well, you know, what you kind of like, okay, this might not be everybody's style, but the instructions in the book tell you how to make that entirely seamlessly. And as you make it and you put it together, it's kind of like one of those, what's, you know, it's one of those little magical things happening on your needles, and then suddenly it creates a shape without sewing anything up. So there's a lot of fun and exploration to be had there. I'd love them to have more love, really.
I hope it does. It's an amazing presentation. Yeah, even if they might seem like too much. I mean, you just choose one and go with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing, is you can. There's, you know, it's, you just pick it up and try it out, and it's just this one square at a time. It's actually really, really good. I talk about this publicly. I'm both autistic and ADHD, and I'm the hyperactivity, very, very short attention span flavor of ADHD. So it is one square at a time. So if you are busy or you have brains like mine, you're only doing one at a time. That's it. And then before you know it, you've made yourself a hat. Really, really good for that. There's, you know, especially in the current state of the world, where we're all kind of so stressed and our attention spans, even, you know, people that don't have ADHD are much shorter than they would be. It's perfect little bits of bite-sized knitting that don't require a great deal of focus, and they don't require you to do anything at the end either, other than put it on your head.
Yes, but you have to decide in which way you have to put it on your head.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, there's that decision. You have to decide which way you want to wear it. Yeah, there's that.
Okay, thank you so much. Kath,
I've actually knitted one of those
Yes.
cuboidal hats, and they are brilliant. So I'd recommend them to anyone. It's a completely different direction of things, that my pattern that I think people would love, but it hasn't taken off. I've sold it at a couple of live events, but it hasn't had any online sales, I don't think, which is a shame. It was first published in the Knitter, and it's a lengthways knitted scarf, and it's called Bargello Aurora, and it's just garter stitch with shaping from knit 2 together or knit 3 together, and then multiple increases to get these wonderful zigzags, which you increase the effect of when you block it and pin it out and pull it. I think it could be that the number of stitches that you need to cast on is maybe a little bit off-putting, and then the fact that because you're knitting it lengthways and because it's got a zigzag in it, it feels really, really long, and each row seems to take a long time. It's an 84 stitch repeat, you know, so that is going to take a bit of concentration and focus. But while I've been sitting here, I've actually been thinking what I could do is do a shorter version that it becomes a cowl that flips over, because it does look really cool when it's folded in half, because the points come at different places like that. So that looks pretty awesome. So I might actually do that and include that as an option in the pattern, and that might help it develop a bit of popularity, because I love this pattern. I think it's really nice.
It is
And
gorgeous.
essentially it's 2 rows with stripes, so it's really not that hard in itself, but I think it might be the length of the rows that people are thinking, oh my word, that's a lot of stitches, it's too many for me. So maybe a shorter cowl version might help it get a bit of love.
I think it's very beautiful. Can you work it in the other direction? So you just make one pattern repeat?
Well, you
and-
could, you'd just have the one, if you had the one repeat and worked it that way, yeah, you absolutely could. And perhaps that would be something that I need to highlight to people as well, because that would be less counting, definitely, and you'd get just more of the stripes, and that would still look rather funky.
And you can also make it then with a shorter gradient yarn.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, because
Very
this is 5 colors separately
Mm.
dyed by Cat and Sparrow. I sent her a picture that I found of the Aurora Borealis and said, can I have some colors based on this? And she came up with these 5, and it's like, perfect. It's nice having yarny friends.
It's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And now for the last question, what are we going to see from you next? If you want to continue, Kat?
So more shawls. I've got a couple more knit along shawls that I've been asked to do, so I haven't started designing them yet, but they are going to be happening next year. I'm currently working on a unisex cabled jumper that has actually sort of been in my bag for a while. I'm on the sleeves. I've done the front, I've done the back. Sleeve Island is sort of pausing me for some reason, but it's going to be saddle shoulders, and the idea of the design is that anyone can wear it. It's not a man's jumper or a woman's jumper, it's just a jumper. So I really like it, and it's got a really nice main panel down the front. But the one that I'm currently really working on is an adult version of my honey bun cardigan. That's the child's version, which has got a slip stitch pattern and a nice little stripy button band on it. And whenever I've taken it to yarn shows, people have said, oh, I really like that. And I said, well, it goes up to age 8. Oh, so okay, so I need to do an adult version. So that's what I'm doing. So this is the adult version. I've extended the color pattern at the bottom, and it's worked in, the body's worked in one piece. So it's quite, again, it's quite long, but once you get to the armholes, it suddenly flies by, because it's a sort of combo of a set-in sleeve and a raglan, so it goes up to nothing at the top of the fronts, and then the sleeves, I'm working both at the same time to make my life easier, so I don't have to try and remember what I did, writing it as I go. They're the same as the child's version without the extra color, because otherwise it's going to be really quite tight, and I mentioned arms before, so they're going to be quite generous, and then go in to meet the body with a bit of shoulder shaping. So that's coming out hopefully in the first half of next year.
It's awesome. It's a very beautiful sweater, and I love the
Thanks.
shape. The shoulder shaping is great for most people.
Yeah. So on the child's version, don't know if you can see that there, you've got the seams, then you've got a tiny bit of shaping there. That's the age 4 version, just because people's shoulders aren't square,
Yeah,
they're rounded.
we are
So
not
you kind of
squares.
need something there to help it actually sit right.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing it. Leila, what do you have coming up?
I've got 3 things I wanted to tell you about. Firstly, my shawl here. I've been doing some attempts at brioche and lace, and you really often see shawls that are like, a brioche panel or a garter stitch panel and then a lace panel, and they're just kind of, they can be nice stitch designs, but they're kind of just clumped next to each other. So for this one, I wanted to make sure that there was sort of flow from one to the other. So I'm quite happy with how that turned out. So testing has finished with this one, and it's gone back to my tech editor for the second look at it. So hopefully that'll be ready to publish, hopefully in January. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which will hopefully also be out second half of January or maybe February, is an introduction to brioche course online. It's I don't know how many people know, but PayHip has a platform that you can use for online courses. So I've set it up using that. I like teaching, but I'm in the wrong time zone to teach online for most of my customers. So I thought I'd do it so that it's not fully interactive. So it's all videos and people can work their way through the swatch, watching each video at a time at their own pace. So that's also with testers at the moment. I found a bunch of testers who haven't tried brioche before, or at least not successfully, and they're giving it a go to see what they think. And assuming all that goes well, then that should be ready early next year. And the third thing I'm working on is my first brioche garment. I've almost finished knitting it, so then I'm going to have to do all the grading and all that sort of stuff. I was put off garments for a long time because anyone who's tried brioche will know that it's pretty stretchy, which is not always ideal when you're having, and it's twice the weight too, because you've got the 2 colors of yarn. So there's a lot riding on the shoulders. Like the brioche can really stretch over the shoulders in very unattractive ways. So I was hesitant to go into that until I could do something, find a way of designing the garment so that it would not have all these stretching problems. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that garment as well. I'm making no guarantees about when that will come out because the testing itself will take several months. I don't want to have to rush my testers through anything. And I've never graded a garment before, so goodness knows how long that will take. But that'll next year sometime.
That sounds amazing. And yeah, go brioche. So if anyone's interested, try the new course coming out soon.
Yeah, keep an eye out, because hopefully, all those people whose New Year's resolutions are to learn a new knitting technique. I mean, the number one comment I get was, "Oh, I love that pattern, but I don't brioche." And then the number 2 comment after they've learned brioche was, "Oh, that's not as hard as I thought it was." So,
Yeah, and it's always a great thing to have a course where you can direct people
exactly.
starting from now on. That's
I
awesome.
can fix that problem. You don't know how to brioche? Here you go. There's the link.
Yep, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Wooly, what do you have coming up?
Oh, I have some big things coming up next year. Hopefully, the first thing, will be my website will be finished. Hopefully, it's been in progress for nearly 3.5 years. It's not going to be just a pattern store. It's not just have my blog, and it's also going to have a teaching platform because I've got a number of classes on hat design available on Teachable, and I want to move it all together into one place. So, and again, we're focusing a great deal on making that as accessible as possible. And something I was going to say earlier about one of my focuses of accessibility is for autistic and ADHD people, because it's something that's obviously important to me because it's something I'm affected by. So we're working a great deal on that on the website and trying to make it nice and clean and everything. So that's one big project that I would really, really like to have some closure on, because it's been going on for a long time. But it's exciting, it's getting there. So that's going to be really, really cool. I'm also, my business is also a formal publisher. So I am starting to publish some patterns that are basically designed by my partner to match a lot of my hats. It was his idea, it was his brainchild, and I'm just like, no, I am not publishing something that's not a hat. And so we talked about it, and this is the route that we've gone. But the way that my website's been set up, and because I'm a formal publisher, there are grand scheme ideas brewing of being able to invite guest designers to publish their patterns via my website that are going to match onto the database and things. I'm not aiming to be another big site. It's going to be kind of small, but hat focused or technique focused, things that people come to me for, bring other people in that do those same things. That's my big dream. We'll see how that goes. We'll work with just me and Tom at the moment, but so that's one thing. I'm working on a new collection at the moment, which will probably be in September release now, a new collection of hats that are looking at a technique that I've been developing for a number of years, but because I often do it sideways in hats, people get put off by the grafting, I think, more than anything. So I'm trying to make these hats that are nice graphic detail, statement pieces, but more approachable in technique wise, kind of like stepping stones to some of the other projects that I do. So yeah, there's more hats on the needles. But my biggest project, and it's actually a real shame with the hat, we've had to shift a couple of deadlines. The cover reveal was meant to be a couple of weeks ago, but it's now coming out. The cover reveal is going to be in January because there's been some back-end changes with the publisher. But I have a book coming out with Six and Spring Press, which is the book arm of Vogue Knitting. It is about this technique that I have been developing for 6-7 years now, short row color work. It's never been written about before. And so it's going to be a completely new type of color work kind of coming out in book form, going onto the market. So that feels kind of like really, really exciting, but also kind of like a serious amount of pressure as well, because it's just like, well, we spend a lot of time working on the articles and the tutorials and explaining the concepts of it. It is a book that is a stitch dictionary. It is also a technique overview of all of the things involved, which involves short rows and grafting, because it's short row color work. So of course it's got short rows in it, but there's tutorials on how to repair German short rows and knitting backwards, but also knitting German short rows backwards and doing all covering everything. Lots of in-depth articles about the technique itself, discussing, I don't know if anybody's knit any of my, I know there's a couple of people here that I know that I have knit them. My sideways colorwork hats, the ones that I've got up here in the background, this is one of my latest ones. My method of charting that I use when I design these is what I call maps. So because you're doing so many short rows, you're kind of like, I focus on direction. You're just knitting garter stitches, just knit stitches. So rather than having to worry about traditional charting method, which actually kind of makes it more complicated, I use maps. So that's also been explained a great deal in the book. And there are also 10 patterns, which are not all hats. And I actually had some guest designers from quite a range of skills and locations. I brought them in, and I've had guest designer design projects based on the stitch motifs and stitch stitching design, which is just, I have to say, that's the most phenomenal kind of mind-bending thing ever, to have designers that you have respect for, your peers, come in and design a pattern with a technique that you've developed and a stitch motif that you've developed. Is just kind of like, it's incredible. It's a really, really amazing process. So, and there's lots of shawls, and there are scarves, and there's a couple of hats, and there's some really fantastic mittens and things. So yeah, this is a big release that's coming out in April is when the book goes live. And yeah, it's been dominating my life for a year and a half. So that'll be something else that would be really nice to get out and get finished. It's kind of hard when you've got lots of long projects. I want to go back to just doing hats for a little while. They're much quicker than a big book or a big website. So yeah, lots of 2024 has got to be better than 2023. This has been I know this has been a rough year for a lot of people, and it's really cool to see that people have got plans for next year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I hope it's a great success. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your maps for short rows. Trying them out.
They're actually, when I first started publishing them, there were a few people that just kind of like, I don't get this. I don't get it at all. And then I was just like, actually, don't think about it with a chart. Don't overthink it. Just look, kind of go, I'm just knitting that way. And then I'm in that way. And then people were kind of like, oh yeah. And I've had a lot of people that are just kind of saying, I can't work with charts. I don't want to do charts. And I was like, it's not a chart, and just try it. And then they've come out and said, this is a really more kind of just logical way of looking at your stitches. You're just looking at the direction you're knitting in, and not worrying about what other stitch you're doing. It's just what color, what direction. That's it.
That's awesome. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. My voice is out now, but if we have anyone who wants to ask a question, please let us know now. We have 1 minute left. So, yeah, no one? Okay, in the comments, I saw some nice people. Sorry.
I think Amber's just put her hand up.
Amber, yes, please.
Trying to figure out how to use Zoom again. So my question, I know that you all are very good about including like tutorial photos or videos. Can you speak a little bit about what that process is like how much time it takes in your design process, and just what your approach is to doing tutorials?
Do you have a particular designer who you'd like to answer, or everyone?
And everyone or anyone, yeah.
Kath, would you please?
Well, my tutorials on my website are pretty short, so sometimes it'll be something that I get asked about, and then I'll just cast on a few stitches to show that specific technique. I often don't think about videoing something while I'm designing, because my head's in designing, not in teaching, unless it's come from the other way around and I've designed it because of teaching I've been doing, in which case I might. But I'm trying to keep it short because I know we're low on time.
Okay, thank you, Lila. Do you have an estimation of time?
If I remember to do it at the time, it's pretty quick because I don't have a complicated setup. I get my phone on a stand and fill my hands as I'm knitting. So if I remember to do it while I'm knitting the shawl, then I just wait till I get to the particular stitch, because I have some stitches that either I've made up or they're very uncommon. So I used to do photo tutorials, and they were actually more annoying because then you have to get your stitches in the right way and then let go and take the picture, and you've dropped the needle, and and then you have to have arrows pointing to the different stitches. So actually, since I switched to video tutorials, that works a lot better.
That's awesome. Thank you. Wooly?
I tend to focus primarily on photo tutorials, and they are more time consuming, I think, to produce than video. But I don't get on very well with video as a teaching format. Not unless it's broken down into really tiny little chunks and is well planned, because it's just, you know, I lose the thread very, very easily. And I've only recently had decent internet access, so YouTube is just, I'm just kind of like discovering YouTube now. So photo tutorials are my thing, and I put a lot of time into them. I find that it's really, really important to kind of cover every single detail. So yeah, that's that. I actually probably spend as much time working on photo tutorials as I do the patterns as well that go with it. But I built a bank up now, so it's kind of that helps.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Amber, for your question. That was a great question. So since we are at the end of the event, I would like to thank all the designers and the participants. And I would like to invite you to the rest of the panels if you want to participate. And I just added the links for our designers in the chat. So I thank you, everyone, for participating. I learned a lot about you, and I hope everyone else has as well. And I will see you in the event. I will close the recording now, so I wish you a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.